Jai Sri Radhe. Welcome to the Migratory Monk channel. Keeping in mind the present political scenario of Bharat, I thought that it is a right time to present some actual facts regarding the Arya-Dravid superficial conflict, which is invented by some corrupt, characterless, evil-minded political dynasty of modern India. If this conflict continues for a long time, it has the potentiality to destroy the Vedic civilization to a great extent. So, it is an essential, sacred duty for all Sanātan Hindus to understand this matter properly. Dravids, alias Druids, were the leaders, mentors, supervisors, or administrators of the ancient Aryan, Vedic, Sanātan Hindu civilization and culture throughout the world, and yet their great role has either been cleanly forgotten or completely misunderstood. Here, I am giving you a very interesting example. In Europe, tiny and isolated groups calling themselves Druids maintain an enigmatic secrecy about their organization and publications and come out once in a while in the open to pay public homage to the sun on solstice and equinoxes in a quaint ceremonial. One very intriguing fact is that among their publication is listed a Shiva Samhita. Obviously, that was an ancient Sanskrit text containing chants in praise of Lord Shiva and possibly some secret formula for generating power through nuclear fusion and fission. But now, except for the title, there is nothing Sanskrit or Vedic about it. The booklet perhaps contains some esoteric lines of the Druid ritual in English. This has been the fate of all Sanskrit texts, including the Vedas in Europe. For instance, in Scandinavia, the name of the Vedas survives, though spelled as Edda, E-D-D-A, but the contents have all been changed. Edda still remains the ancient-most Scandinavian scripture, but it is all stuffed with fairy tales in the local modern language instead of the ancient Sanskrit chants. These two instances of the Shiva Samhita and the Vedas retaining their titles but losing their contents may be likened to an ancient fruit found among historic ruins, with its hard shell and shape intact but its kernel all shriveled and dried up. Another analogy could be that of a snarling leaping tiger shot in shikar being stuffed in sawdust and displayed in a showcase with its bones and flesh all scooped out and destroyed. All ancient Sanskrit Vedic texts have met a similar fate in regions invaded and occupied by Christianity and Islam. Along with those scriptures, the Druids, alias Dravids, too got hounded out, rendering them almost extinct with the near eclipse of the Vedic culture in Europe and West Asia. But since Vedic culture, alias Hinduism, survives to a great extent in Bharat, its intellectual leadership, the Dravids, form an important and prominent component of Bharatiya society. But even in Bharat, the Dravid community is enveloped in misconception because of a long spell of British rule, when British educators either ignorantly or deliberately showed dissensions among various sections of the Indian public. One sedulously ingrained misconception which has poisoned the minds of a section of the English educated public is that Dravids are a separate dark skinned racial group which occupied the whole of India, means Bharat. They were invaded by some alien fair skinned Sanskrit speaking tribes known as Aryans. Because of their superior arms, the Aryans drove the Dravids to the south of the Vindhyas, while they remained content with occupying the north of Bharat. Yet they adopted and admitted the Dravidian deity Shiva to the Aryan pantheon. Reciprocally, the Dravids were infected with such a great liking for Sanskrit that they not only cultivated great scholarship in Sanskrit but they also adopted the entire Aryan way of life guided by the Vedic ceremonies. From the antenatal to the postmortem stage. So, we are made to believe that there has existed between the Aryans and the Dravidians since about 3000 years a dual kind of love and hate relationship. Nothing can be so absurd as this theory. Every one of its postulates is baseless. That such an irrational doctrine should be believed in by a section of the English educated Indian public illustrates the danger of alien tutoring. It also exemplifies how people generally allow thoughts, ideas, and concepts fed to them instead of doing some original thinking. We shall therefore clarify this issue in this video. Arya is not a race. Arya is a Sanskrit word signifying a way of life to godhood. For example, rising an Atma to the Mahatma stage and then to direct audience of the Paramatma level means Paramahansa stage. This is the aim and goal of Vedic culture. That is why it lays down strict rules and moral continence and discipline guided with regulatory sacraments, beginning from the prenatal stage and extending to the postmortem. Anybody not prepared to live according to those Vedic standards of behavior was dubbed an anarya. But that was not a permanent exclusion. With a prayaschitta means a sort of penitential reversal ritual, he could be readmitted to be once again an industrious and obedient member of the Vedic social system. To comprehend the absurdity of the Arya versus Dravid controversy, let us first understand the term Arya. The Vedas visualize divinity as all-pervading. Therefore, every visible object or invisible element is considered to be a manifestation of divinity and is identified with the immanent Godhead. Consequently, Vedic culture sees one supreme Godhead subdivided into numerous manifestations, in which each part or each deity represents the supreme Godhead. Shiva is an integral part of that Godhead. It is like one person being looked upon as a head of the family in his home, as husband by the wife, as father by the children, as boss by his employees, as a subordinate by his superior, as an uncle by his nephews, and so on. Thus, the same individual appears different in different capacities. The same is the Vedic concept of divinity. Therefore, all Vedic deities represent the supreme governing power of the universe. It is the same in state administration, from the lowest peon and clerk to the highest sovereign or president. Every bureaucrat is a link in the chain of supreme governmental authority. It is one single supreme indivisible authority percolation through its different components, appearing to be subdivided yet remaining undivided. In spiritual science, it is called Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, means inconceivable one and different at the same time. Since divinity is all-pervading, it also exists in stones. Therefore, worshipping divine idols for those with faith in them is a perfectly rational activity. Contrarily, those who vehemently oppose idol worship are being unduly unreasonable in excluding stones, pictures, and caricatures from the divine domain. Vedic culture, on the other hand, permits everyone full scope to pray and worship according to his or her individual faith. All that Vedic culture demands is be truthful, honest, clean, and helpful in your dealings with others. When you do that, your form of worship or non-worship and brand of theism or atheism are of no relevance or concern at all under Vedic culture. The essence is the difference of faiths are based upon an individual person's qualification and consciousness. That's all. Vedic culture of Aryans pervaded the whole world from the beginning of time. Naturally, it required a class of learned administrators of sterling character to be at the helm of affairs, to be priests, preceptors, tutors, astrologers, judges, executives, mathematicians or doctors, etc. That class was known as DRāVIDS. The word is composed of two Sanskrit roots. First, Dra means drashta or seer, and second, Vid means learned or Jnani.
Consequently, Dravids were and are masters of Sanskrit and of Vedic ritual. Dravids have all along been an integral and topmost part of Aryan Vedic culture. They proudly and aptly name their clinics Arya Vaidyasalas. Therefore, all talk of Aryan and Dravids being antagonistic entities is absolutely irrational and unhistorical. Consequently, Shiva has been an Aryan deity and Sanskrit has been the language of Dravids, and there are so many fair and dark-skinned people among the South Indians as there are among the North Indians. South India became a colony of Vedic sages alias Dravids from the time that sage Agastya in the hoary past crossed the Vindhyas and established a number of education cum training centers of Vedic culture throughout peninsular Bharat. Ever since, South Indians have been collectively called Dravids, though even among them the Malayalis, the Kannadigas, Andhras and Tamilians have their own different languages and script. That they all and partly even Maharashtrians continue to be collectively grouped as Dravids, despite their writing different scripts and speaking different languages, indicates that they all belong to a common ancient fold of Vedic Sanskrit centers in peninsular Bharat. Another strong proof is their adoration and firm adherence to the Vedic way of life. Besides this misconception about Arya and Dravid being rival groups, there persists an intra-Dravid misconception. Among the Dravids themselves, the non-Brahmins have been made to believe by ambitious persons wanting to be held as community leaders by whipping up group sentiments that the Sanskrit learning, Veda reciting Brahmins are an alien community, lording it over on the non-Brahmins. Under the Vedic system, Brahminism is a mere professional group like any other. Lord Krishna has said in Bhagavad Gita that the fourfold division of society is based on aptitude and work. Chaturvarna Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasah. Likewise, Manu, the father of mankind and the great lawgiver, has said Janmana Jayate Sudraha Sanskarat Dvija Uchyate. Means by birth everybody is a Sudra because he is uncultured and only gradual training and teaching makes a person a Vaishya, Kshatriya or Brahmana. Here, it may be remembered that no group of Vedic society was a bed of roses. Each demanded high and stern standards of behavior. The Sudra, as a manual worker, was enjoined to be physically clean. He was allowed to accumulate wealth. He had to discharge his social responsibilities and abstain from vices. A high academic standard was not expected of him. A Vaishya was expected to be good at farming, economics, mathematics and commerce, lead a very clean and healthy life with a daily bath, etc. Charge only the admissible margin of profit and keep donating money for public charities throughout his life. Similarly, a Kshatriya is expected to have higher standards of morality, cleanliness, bravery, patriotism, sacrifice and public service. One who aspired to rise even higher, for example to Brahminhood, he was not only to be adept at the duties of all the other three classes but had also to be very abstemious. He must have no addiction. He must charge no fees for any service and must not possess any property. He must never lose his temper and never use arms to assault or kill anybody. Any lapse by a person of the Brahmin status attracted severe punishment. Thus, the Brahmin status was hard to attain and sustain. It demanded lifelong dedication to knowledge and social service with total abstinence from vices, luxuries or rest. Considering all this, Brahminism was not an imposition, it was an attainment. The current caste status has developed two major faults. What were intended to be professional groups such as carpenters, weavers, potters, blacksmiths, goldsmiths, cobblers, etc. have turned into rigid caste leading to various kinds of touchability and untouchability. Secondly, they have become birth-bound. For example, the father's status as a Sudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya or Brahmana attaches to his progeny, no matter what work he does or the norms of behavior he follows. This being an aberration, it is not going to last long. caste and marriage restrictions are already crumbling because they are no longer based on ancient Vedic norms. In the modern world, since getting rich quickest by any means seems to be the general ideal, everybody is tending to be a Vaishya in outlook but Sudras in behavior. It needs to be pointed out here, however, that in a well-regulated Vedic society, even the Sudra, though mainly a manual worker, his standard of behavior and social responsibility used to be very high because he was as much a component of Vedic society as the Brahmin. The difference was merely in the nature of their academic attainments, work and duties. The standard of behavior of all was very high. In adherence to truth, in rendering service, in abstinence, in material and monetary discipline, and personal and domestic hygiene, everybody in the Vedic society from a Sudra to Brahmana observed meticulous standards. Dravids have been the upholders, guides and monitors of that Aryan Vedic Sanātan Hindu way of life, which they still are. They have been known as Druids in Europe and Dravids in Bharat. A lot of information of these fascinating groups which lies scattered and unknown I purpose to present here called from different sources. Reverend Thomas Morris observes, the Asiatic origin of the Druids had long been an acknowledged point in the world of antiquities. Mr. Reuben Burrough, the great practical astronomer of India, was the first person who, after a strict examination and comparison of their mythological superstitions and their periods, directly affirmed them to be a race of emigrated Indian philosophers. Thomas Morris again says, these priests, means the Druids, Brahmins of India, spread themselves widely through the northern regions of Asia, even to Siberia itself, and gradually mingling with the great body of Celtic tribes, means Kolotoya people to the south of Kashmir, pursued their journey to the extremity of Europe and finally established the Druid, that is, the Brahmin system of superstition in ancient Britain. This, I contend, was the first Oriental colony settled in these British islands. Hereunder I purpose to reproduce for the readers the information and some relevant passages from a book titled A Complete History of the Druids, their origin, manners, customs, temples, rites and superstitions, with an inquiry into their religion and its coincidence, with the patriarchal Lynchfields printed by and for T.G. Lomax and sold by Logman, Hurst, Ridge and Ormans, London, 1810 AD. On the backside exterior of the cover is the sketch of a bearded old man with feet bare below the knees, wearing a loose knee-length gown, holding an open book in the right hand and a staff in the left, a length of cloth slung over the shoulders, almost like a Vedic sage that anyone would envisage. The introduction refers to stone relics of old, such as the pillars, the circle, and the serpent seen at several ancient sites throughout the world, and adds, the Romans brought with them the use of covered temples. On the perversion of the inhabitants, these open places in all probability were entirely neglected, if not partly demolished. They were to be destroyed in the land of Canaan because they had been abused there. But how far the Israelites were forbidden to set up any more will best appear from the precept itself. For example, in Levit XXVI-1 says, we shall make you no idols nor graven images, neither shall you put up any image of stone in your land to bow down unto it, for I am the Lord your God. These details will scarcely be understood by any Western scholars because the details referred to therein are completely unfamiliar to them. Again, the book says the Druids must have been there very early, since persons of indisputable learning have thought them to be of British origin. But this opinion has been refuted by Dr. Stukely, who says they first made their appearance from the eastern parts of the world about the time of Abraham. This too is very significant observation, as I have spoken previously that the Druids as Vedic administrators and supervisors were trained in South India to be deployed on duty in the rest of the world. It is because of that South India has been known as the Dravid region. In course of time, the term Dravid was mistaken to be that of a race, but it is not a race will be apparent from the fact that in our own times, South India is a region inhabited by people who speak different languages and write different scripts. Yet their common characteristic which made them Druids was their expertise in Vedic culture and Sanskrit language. The well-known Roman general Julius Caesar has, in his memoirs, also referred to Druids. He writes, "Everywhere in Gaul means France, two classes only are of any account. One of the two classes consists of the Druids, the other of the Knights. The former officiate at the worship of the gods, regulate sacrifices, private as well as public, and expound questions of religion. Young men resort to them in large numbers for study, and the people hold them in great respect. They are judges in nearly all disputes. They settle the matter and fix the awards or fines. If any litigant, whether an individual or a tribe, does not abide by their decision, they excommunicate the offender, and persons who are under such a sentence are looked upon as impious monsters. Everybody avoids them, everybody shuns their approach and conversation for fear of incurring pollution. If they appear as plaintiffs, they are denied justice, nor they have any share in the offices of state. The Druids are all under one head, who commands the highest respect among the order. The Druids hold an annual session on a settled day at a hallowed spot in the country of the KRUSHNA, the reputed center of Gaul means France. All litigants assemble here from all parts and abide by their decisions and awards. So, the Druids and the Knights referred previously are obviously the Brahmin and Kshatriya classes of Vedic society. Both are Sanskrit words, since Druids means sage and seers, while the Knight is a malpronunciation of the Sanskrit word Nayak alias Naik, means military general. Please remember carefully that the description of the Druids left by Julius Caesar is of the decades just prior to the beginning of the Christian era. Yet that same description applies foursquare to the Dravids of South India and in fact to all Hindus throughout Bharat, even of the 20th and 21st century. Strict excommunication was imposed on violators of social taboos. Another important fact is the area KRUSHNA in France is obviously the Sanskrit name Karnavati. Ancient Bharat had two hallowed cities of that name. There are hundreds of evidences like this I can cite here, but I don't want to make a long video. So I leave it here. The main objects of making this video is that the Sanātan Hindu should never ever commit the mistake of thinking that the Aryan and Dravids are races. These are qualifications offered to deserved candidates or individuals. Thank you very much for watching this video. Jai Shri Ram, Jai Jai Shri Radhe Shyam.